Joined on the phone today by author Adam White. We're talking about his new book, Motown, The Sound of Young America. Hey, Adam, how's it going today?
Hey, Dustin. I'm good. How are you?
I am excellent. It's great to be speaking with you.
I'm a Brit, so you know I'm going to ask about the weather.
Well, it's cold around these parts. It's been cold forever, it seems, but I guess we're used to it here.
Yes.
Well, Adam, I got to ask you about your new book here. Of course, Motown, not too far from us here in Minnesota, and in your new book, Motown, The Sound of Young America. Can you tell the listeners a bit about it?
I certainly can, and thank you for asking. And I guess I hope that it tells the story in two ways. It tells the story through visuals, through pictures. I mean, it is the first book with as much visual presentation of that story as any that's gone before, with more than 1,000 pictures. So, you know, and each picture is worth 1,000 words, you could say. So it's a visual story in the first part. First of all, of course, there is the music. You have to acknowledge the music is why we're having this conversation. The music of Motown and the stars. But beyond that, the book tries to capture how they looked and how the image they had and what wonderful stories were told by those images. And then secondly, an attempt to tell the story of the people I call the backroom believers, the people behind the scenes who helped build that business and who don't always get the credit for doing it, but who were absolutely vital to the success. So that's the other key element. And in doing so, I guess I hope telling a few stories that people haven't read before.
Yeah, I got to say, when I first heard of the book, it sounded cool, but I mean, I had no idea it was going to be as big and as in-depth as it is. You obviously put a lot of work into this book.
It was a lifetime's work, but then I'd been listening to Motown for a lifetime, so I guess it was something it was a labor of love, and I enjoyed every minute.
Yeah, it's the 60th anniversary of Motown, and you know, as you mentioned, after all these years, the music that came from that label still loved by people of all ages.
Yes, and I mean, it is quite remarkable. You think about it. Some of these artists, they did begin 60 years ago, and they're still out there. I mean, look, you know, Smokey Robinson is still on the road. He's still performing. In fact, he's never going to go off the road, I suspect. The same is true of Stevie Wonder. You've got a Temptations musical telling their story, opening. It's now just open on Broadway. You've got Diana Ross on the Grammys. It's the way that music, that talent has lasted is quite remarkable, and a long way from what it was 60 years ago when they were just kids, you know, with ambitions and hopes in music, but nobody could have imagined, least of all Berry Gordy, the company's founder, that 60 years later would be still talking about it. Quite something.
Again, author Adam White with us. We're talking about his book, Motown, The Sound of Young America. And Adam, can you talk a bit about the process of putting the book together? Because I know you've got a lot of interviews and insight into things, as you mentioned, most people have probably never heard before.
True, yes. It was a lot of fun. Look, I mean, in particular, I think music writers often, the challenge is to find material and to talk to people and to ask questions that haven't been asked before. Because, look, when you have artists as successful and well-known as these, the ones who recorded for Motown, it's quite hard to get, you know, a fresh take on it. They've told their stories, often in autobiographies. Everyone knows everything about so many of them, but the trick, I think, is to try and go deeper, and you do that by doing enough research so that when you sit down with a Smokey Robinson, you can ask him questions that he hasn't been asked before, so he's not tempted to tell the same stories that he's done many times before. Or you talk to people who were behind the scenes, and the virtue of that is that if you're behind the scenes, if you make a key contribution to the development and success and growth of a company like Motown, you know a great deal of stuff. I mean, Barney Ailes, who was Berry Gordy's right-hand man for all those years, was there. He saw it all happen. He worked on it. He helped make it happen. He got the records played. He got the companies paid. But he knew those people. And so you get stories, first-hand stories and pictures, I should add, that haven't been out there before. So that's a virtue as a writer. You know, you do your research, you put in the time, but then you try and find interesting angles or interesting people that are not familiar to the audience. And in this day and age, particularly because we know so much about the stars, you kind of want to go deeper, and there does seem to be an appetite for behind the scenes.
Definitely. And when it comes to Motown, a lot of people think of, the Jackson 5 and Smokey Robinson and Stevie Wonder, artists like that. But Motown had so much stuff going on and released a lot of stuff that people might not realize. They had the rock stuff and spoken word, comedy albums, and pretty much every genre they had offshoots.
Yep. Yeah, and one of the fun things in one of the very many people who were not necessarily what you'd expect, Stevie Wonder's lawyer, Johannes Vigoda, is a really weird character, but he was as smart as they come, as smart as a fox. But he had this persona that would be quite off-putting. In fact, the time I interviewed him once, we were in a London hotel, and we started the interview, and then halfway through, he got up, and he walked across into the lobby of the hotel and started playing the piano. And I was thinking, was it something I said? Is he bored? Am I through? What's happening here? So he plays a tune on the piano, comes back, sits down, and continues the interview. Like, what? So those are the things you don't always expect, but they make it all the more pleasurable.
And again, Adam White with us, and the book Motown, The Sound of Young America is out now, and it's the 60th anniversary of Motown. And, it's amazing to think all this music came out of that tiny studio. I've been to that Motown Museum in Detroit, and it's really not very big and not really very fancy, but a lot of stuff came out of there.
Oh, yes. It is extraordinary to stand there, isn't it? And really, as you say, a small four-wall studio. And you think of the music that came out of that, the musicians who played in it, the electricity that was in there, you kind of just can't really believe it. And as it's a museum, I keep worrying that they get so many visitors, at what point are they going to close it? Because they're afraid of all the footfall going through the room.
Yeah, I know when I went there, it was kind of going through alleys and back roads, and then you pretty much just park on a side street, and it's right there. So it's definitely, I could see how it would be overwhelmed by visitors. Yes,
and then, whoever thought, back in the day when they were making that music, whoever thought people would want to come visit, look, and stand, and take it all in. The very fact that it exists and people can do it is itself quite something.
Well, Adam, this is probably an odd question, but I got to ask you about, one of the few times Motown went into the film business. I got to ask you if you have any tidbits on The Last Dragon.
Oh, it's funny. Somebody asked me the other day, what was the next book I was going to write, and I was thinking, there's fabulous stories about Motown in the movies. Those years it was trying to make it. And The Last Dragon seems to have this sort of cult around it. I actually haven't. I want to go pursue some of the people involved, because I'm amazed that it has lasted and still attracts people, and people want to know more about it. There are stories to be told there, I'm sure. The director and the people involved, Ladies Sing the Blues, have told some interesting stories. Nobody's talked enough about The Last Dragon.
I agree for sure. Well, again, Adam, I know the book just out, Motown, The Sound of Young America. Do you know if maybe there's anything else coming up or something else we should look out for?
Well, later this year, there's a pretty interesting documentary about Motown that's coming out, and I had some small part in that, but I think it's going to be really quite illuminating. In particular, you see some footage of Berry Gordy and Smokey Robinson in the studio. This is new film footage. But in that studio that you just talked about a minute ago, and you realize when you see the two of them together, the electricity, the friendship, the spark between those two men, no wonder that company succeeded, because to this day they still have something magic about the relationship between these two music people.
Awesome. Well, again, the book is amazing, and I hope everybody out there gets a chance to see it. And again, Adam, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Dustin, thanks for your interest. So long.
And again, that was author Adam White, and his new book, Motown, The Sound of Young America, is available now.